You're listening in on an animated discussion about Batman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from thecinematropolis.com. And today's topic is Season 2, Episode 7, Night of the Ninja.
Caleb, let's talk about the title card for Night of the Ninja.
Let's talk about the title card, Joshua. This thing looks like it's ripped straight from the early 90s. That's for certain.
It is an interesting approach to like cramming together two very different styles. Like the Batman show has a very pulp cover or noir film title card, kind of approach. But they are obviously doing martial arts movie stuff with this one.
Yeah.
And these two things don't really go well together. And I think that's what happened to them on the visuals.
So I can only assume, again, as a person who watched most of this stuff well after it had come out, thinking back about what was popular in the late 80s and early 90s, I want to say that we were on the third Karate Kid film about this time.
Oh, that sounds right.
I'm just throwing that out there because the whole the vibe of that title card. The title card, I'm like, this looks like Ninja Turtles, Karate Kid, 90s style, and in the color palette, even the way they use like those brighter colors on the black.
I think we might be able to blame Canon Films more than anybody else because I know that this is after there were 3 different movies: Ninja 1, 2, and 3. Ninja 3, The Domination.
Oh my gosh,
being a best of the bad movies. It makes a lot of lists for that. You also have like American Ninja. I mean, there were a lot of ninjas, and this look is just kind of this. It's trying to cram all of that stuff into the Batman style,
right?
To middling success.
So I think this title card, and I don't want to jump ahead, but this title card sums up about how I feel about this episode.
You really like the music, but not the visual?
I like the style. I don't like the content.
Interesting.
Actually, I should say that. I like some of the content, but I don't like most of it. I appreciate the stylings, but because it feels like it's got a lot of nods to cool martial arts stuff. But I definitely feel like someone came to Bruce Timm and said, "Hey, ninjas are hot right now. We should have a ninja episode." And he's like, "How many more episodes do we have this season we need to fill up? Oh, 2 more? Yeah, we can probably throw a couple ninja episodes in there. Just why not? Throw 'em a bone."
Now, I'll say ninjas for Batman is not a ridiculous pull. Like, this makes a lot of sense. His martial arts prowess is often touted as an important part of his character, and he's got, some mysterious years to fill as a younger Bruce Wayne learning this stuff. This is kind of an interesting approach to all of that, but it's not out of the blue, especially as we've talked about a little bit. The pop cultural background radiation of ninjas had not remotely died down yet.
So, not even close. In fact, it's funny. So I don't know if I've actually seen this episode before. Maybe I have. I have vague recollections of this and the other one that we'll talk about in a future episode, Day of the Samurai. Like when I was reading about them, I'm like, oh yeah, I think I might have watched this. But then I was like, wait, am I confusing it with the X-Men the Animated Series episode where Wolverine goes to Japan? Again, it was obviously it was a hot thing in the early 90s.
And that episode was probably coming out, that episode of X-Men the Animated Series was probably coming out roughly the same time. I mean, right. I've talked on this show before. My wife did not believe me that the X-Men Animated Series and BTAS were coming out at the same time. Because one looks really unexpectedly amazing and one looks like X-Men the Animated Series.
Yeah, one of them hasn't aged nearly as well as the other, that's for sure. But I don't know. That's the thing I think of. The Silver, I thought, oh yeah, this is the one who fights the Silver Samurai. Oh wait, Silver Samurai's
Silver Samurai's Marvel.
X-Men, Marvel. Okay, so obviously that's not. But it's a similar type of plot. Like, in fact, I think probably because the source material is better in X-Men, that episode might be better. I haven't watched it. But
Wolverine's ties to Japan, without going too far down this rabbit trail, but Wolverine's ties to Japan have been mined much longer and better than most of Batman's ties to his martial arts training, right. Which is not usually Japan, actually.
Is this a new thing for the show?
It's a variation. Let's call it a variation. I mean, the ones that stand out most in my mind is that more recently they have often talked about Nanda Parbat as the place where he learned sort of mystical kung fu. But the other story that really sticks out in my mind is like a young Bruce Wayne climbing a mountain in Korea.
Okay.
And the reason this sticks out is because I liked kung fu movies when I was a kid, which is probably why this episode sticks out more for me, because it fit into this space that I already enjoyed.
Right.
But this thing where he had to pay millions of dollars for the secret combination on the lock of the door of this monastery where like only one guy lives, the sensei. And then he goes in and nobody greets him. So he just sits down and like goes into lotus, into a meditative place and sits there, and they show the panels of his hair and beard just getting longer.
Wow.
So he's there for some indeterminate amount of time, and then the sensei comes out and says, "You may boil rice." That is some for real kung fu movie stuff.
I am into that.
That is the stuff that like sticks out in my mind. I think they wanted to play with ninjas, so that means Japan. They were at least that sensitive to the cultural stuff. So I don't hate it, but I guess it's sort of been done differently.
Yes, and I'm not trying to knock, and I promise I'll get away from the X-Men comparison, but what stuck out to me more than anything about that comparison is that I think the villain, rival, whatever, in this episode is pretty weak sauce, lame sauce compared to Silver Samurai, who's actually got some like motivations I buy and stuff like this. I'm like, this guy, I'm like, he's greedy. Why did he come all the way to Gotham to make a lot of money?
Well, that's a little bit to get revenge on Bruce Wayne.
A little bit.
I think mostly he'd clearly been stealing other things.
Right.
But the thing I liked most about this episode is how it slams all this secret identity stuff into one story, right? It's not Batman that angered Kyodai Ken. It's Bruce Wayne. Kyodai Ken comes to steal from Bruce Wayne and does not realize he's also running afoul of the Batman.
Right.
It's all a surprise to both of them, right, when they discover each other's levels of secret identity.
Right.
And then you've got, we'll talk more about the awesome Batman and Robin stuff.
There's some great
also
Batman
have
and Robin stuff
Robin showing up to facilitate that secret identity shenanigans. That is the stuff that I really, really like here. You get a little bit of kung fu action dumped on top as seasoning to secret identity stuff, which I love. That is the stuff that I think really works in this episode.
Okay. I can respect that. It didn't work as well for me as it did for you, but I on paper that sounds really cool. And there's fun to be had.
That's good shade. That's good shade.
On paper it sounds great, and I do agree the Robin stuff is pretty strong. Again, just even though the show is not serialized, we've already had Robin's Reckoning, and now we're seeing another advance in that relationship of this happening again.
Absolutely. You notice, now, again, you're right. I don't know how much effort they put into this happened before this, but Batman shuts Robin out of this, and he leaves no room for conversation, but it's much less sort of cold and hard than he did it in Robin's Reckoning.
I mean, it's actually pretty similar, and not as cold because it's not as personal
not
for
angry
Dick
at all.
Right.
Like even on Batman's side,
Right.
it's not don't question me. It's more not this time, Dick.
Right.
Like I saw a real difference there, and by the end of it, you have Robin ignoring his orders and helping. Like
Right.
he ignores his orders in the best way.
Right.
And in between those two things, we have a very serious and kind of cool heart-to-heart about Bruce between Alfred and Dick. Like that feels like a thing that builds on the various changes in Robin's Reckoning.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I agree, because he does ignore Batman, because he senses that Batman's telling him he's getting these orders on what to do or not to do, and then he's like, oh, but I can also tell he's worried.
This is bothering him, right? Yeah.
So,
it's a
he needs our
maturation
help.
of their relationship, I think.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
The end of Robin's Reckoning moved them closer to peers.
Right.
And I think we see that played out here, and I like all that stuff. And
It's
I
good.
also really like he's really only able to defeat Kyodai Ken because Robin is there to hide him from Summer. It's Robin that creates the situation that lets Bruce Wayne win, and that is wonderful.
And another great parallel with just that arc is that at the beginning of the episode, he and Robin are practicing karate or kung fu or something at the beginning, whatever it is.
Okay,
the
let's
martial
go
arts.
with oh my
Martial
gosh,
arts.
Caleb! I just realized another bit of continuity for real.
Oh yeah.
So the most well-known, or one of the 2 or 3 most well-known Japanese hand-to-hand, like no sword, no bow staff, none of that stuff, just straight empty-handed, is jujitsu.
Jiu-jitsu, yes.
Which Bruce Wayne specifically says he knows in Mask of
The Phantasm. So bam.
I had not put that together until this moment.
So they're practicing jiu-jitsu. That's really cool.
Probably jiu-jitsu, or at least Aikido, which is related. I mean,
but you're right. We established that in Mask of the Phantasm.
That is super cool. You know what? This half-ass choosing of Japan over someplace else suddenly feels a lot less half-ass to me. Like they actually made choices
there's some details
based
there.
on previous continuity.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's very subtle continuity because it's not like, oh, we're picking up where this one left off. It's more like, oh, hey, we planted the seed and we're just going to be consistent with that.
We're just going to be consistent. Now, I apologize. That came to me as a lightning bolt while you were talking about Bruce and Dick practicing.
Yes. And Batman was besting Dick, but by the end of the episode, Dick is besting Batman.
Yeah, and I mean, this kind of mirrors the Bruce and Kyodai Ken in the flashbacks. They're pretty evenly matched, but Kyodai Ken is winning much more often, and yeah, I love all that stuff. Like, I don't think any of that's accidental. That's pretty tightly put together, honestly.
And if we're going to mention anything else about the ninja thing with the ninja history, you've already mentioned that was a thing where he goes to Korea to learn things.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that is a reference to a bunch of pulp novels. I'm not going to go any further into that. Just realize that I'm pretty sure the trip to Korea is because the people who are writing Batman are familiar with The Executioner and Justice Incorporated and stuff like that. Google it, friends. It's pretty legit.
If we're talking about Batman training with ninjas, I have to at least acknowledge that Batman Begins, he trains with ninjas. Hikes up into a mountain in the Himalayas, right? I think.
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah, so Bhutan, Southeast Asia, borders Tibet. So somewhere in there, you've got Himalayan mountains, which starts to look like that Nanda Parbat stuff too. Except Nanda Parbat is like actual traditional kung fu movie monks. Usually, when we see it, mystical kung fu, not ninjas. It's really fascinating to watch all these various interpretations of the character have this like weird Venn diagram overlap of details, but not all be the same thing. It's really interesting to see how people adapt various shades of this character.
Right. I mean, because it's a similar take, but it's different. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like it definitely doesn't
absolutely.
feel like a kung fu movie from the 90s or anything like that. Or 80s.
No, not
it
at all.
feels like just its own thing. But still, with ninjas.
No, definitely. And a much more obvious ninja look to his training than what you have in this episode.
Yes.
Like Kyodai Ken turns to that ninja life after he's kicked out of the dojo.
Right.
Now, that said, I don't think that they really name drop this. I don't think that they mention this, but this is another thing that was very obvious with the back tattoo and also would have been a very popular piece of pop culture in the late 80s, early 90s. He's pretty clearly Yakuza. Because that's what the back tattoos are all about.
Definitely.
And so it's like, you're blaming Bruce Wayne, but you were a criminal before you showed up.
Let's be real.
Yeah.
I mean, like we've already kind of talked about the flashbacks, but let's just go ahead and segue into a full convo here.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about again. This is going to tie style with the flashbacks. Again, very obvious trope from like every ninja thing ever. You encounter an old rival from a training ground you met who betrayed the master somehow.
Yes.
I mean, come on.
This is every kung fu movie.
Yes,
like this is kung fu movies.
Kung fu movie.
And I really love that their sensei is called sensei, which is Japanese. So good job. He's wearing clothing for Japanese martial arts. He's actually doing a better job of that than Bruce Wayne or Kyodai Ken are.
Yes.
Honestly. But so he still has a Japanese name, Japanese title, Japanese clothing, but really looks like every awesome ancient master from the kung fu.
Oh, yes. Everyone, the beard, no, yes.
They're doing a thing. The stuff with the candles is much more a kung fu thing.
Yes.
But again, this is the kind of stuff you would see as we're going through various and sundry 36 chambers or learning the Five Deadly Venoms or whatever we're doing.
Or I like to think of Kill Bill, where this is literally Kill Bill. Yeah.
That stuff is right from the same movies that Wu-Tang Clan were taking their names and the titles of the albums from. It's the same stuff. It's so good.
The tributes, they're tributing the same, homaging, I should say, the same movies.
Definitely, yeah. And it's here too, but they are also doing a pretty good job of honoring the fact that they moved it to Japan.
Right.
That we've seen them do on the show cultural choices that have not aged as well.
Right.
This is a pretty good synthesis.
I think so.
Pretty good synthesis.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's offensive by any means. Now, one last thing. Okay, my question for you, Joshua, with these flashbacks is, obviously we have to have them to set up the plot, I don't know that it really does much for the character of Bruce or Batman other than, oh, cool, he trained with the ninja or samurai.
No, I think you're right. I mean, we talked in the Mask of the Phantasm episode that is a movie that really brings the flashbacks into the present of the story. Like, this is a story that is about this thing, but the flashbacks give us weight to that.
Right.
In this case, it's more like they give us details that would make the main plot not actually make any sense.
Right.
Like, without them, we wouldn't know what was going on.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree with you, and I usually think flashbacks are kind of a hack job. These aren't bad because they're pretty short.
Right.
I mean, that's really their saving grace.
But if we're going to talk about flashbacks as a hack job in general, these aren't awful, but this is the type of flashback that I do find egregious because I don't think it does anything to advance the... Flashbacks are great tools for developing your characters. Great tools for your characters. The worst types of flashbacks are the ones that actually don't add anything to your characters, your motivations, what they're doing. It's just there to say, oh, hey, we're missing we don't think you're going to understand what's happening in this plot if we don't do this flashback to this thing. So
I'm going to push back a little bit. I think it's worth saying that I think this is a good episode, but not a great episode.
Sure.
I'm glad we're talking about it. It has a companion episode. There are reasons for us to chat about it, but it's not great. It's not your laughing fish. It's not your heart of ice. It isn't. But it's very good. And I'm going to push back against your flashback feelings because we just talked about how the Kyodai-ken Bruce Wayne fights mirror with the Bruce and Dick fights. We also, if you look at the relationship between Bruce and Kyodai as a character for the purposes of this episode, which is not ridiculous. Like, this is a little esoteric for the 22-minute Batman cartoon, but we've seen this show do stuff that's a little esoteric for the 22-minute Batman show. So if you treat their relationship as a character or a character study, if that makes you feel better, then it actually adds quite a bit of depth to their present-day competition.
I don't know if it does. I like the idea, like what you're saying, I like the idea of the relationship between Kyodai-ken and Bruce Wayne, the young versions of them mirroring the Batman and Robin dynamic we have. I like that quite a bit. But I don't think it does that well. You know what I mean? Like,
no, that is the one that is much more secondary. I mean, I think that it's nice that it's there. That's like one we get to as we drive past. They don't do a lot with it, so I don't want to hang too much on it. But treating the Bruce Kyodai relationship as a evolving thing. I mean, look at how dismissive Kyodai-ken is at the end when Bruce Wayne takes the first fighting stance. And he's like, oh, really? Like, he just can't even believe it. Have you practiced since the day that I left the dojo? You know.
Right.
Because, again, he still does not know, at least at that point, that he's fighting Batman. He just thinks he's fighting Bruce Wayne, who he always thought was kind of a soft loser.
Right.
I mean, and then he's beaten. And it's Bruce Wayne overcoming a fear. How often does Batman get beaten? Like, it happens, but it's not a regular occurrence. And now he has an actual fear because this guy beat him even before he was Batman.
That's true. That's kind of a cool.
I'm telling you.
That's a cool move. I guess I didn't feel it enough. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Like, again, they're telling me this, and I guess my point is, the flashbacks didn't make me feel for why he was afraid.
Yeah,
I saw them, but there wasn't enough. Like, they weren't effective enough for me to be like, oh man, like he is really worried about this guy because the guy kicked his.
So this is a show that needed to do 3 things, and it did 5 things, right? And it didn't need to do those other 2 things. And if they had cut those other 2 things, it would have been a tighter piece. We follow Summer Gleason around way more than is necessary. I mean, now, they don't spend a lot of time on her, but it's a 22-minute show. The 2 minutes that she's talking to her editor are 1/11 of the show, right? Like, we could have
every minute counts.
Yeah, every minute counts. And so again, it's not bad. Like, that's not a terrible decision, but I get where you're coming from. These character beats are not as sharp as they could be.
Yes.
And another couple of minutes would sharpen them up.
Right.
I do think they are sharp enough. I think seeing somebody beat young Bruce Wayne and him being so angry, but I have to be the best, you know, and I love that stuff. And I like that the Master's advice to him actually carries forward. He does not actually apply that advice until he is an adult, dressed up in Dracula drag. Well, he's not in Dracula drag when he fights the ninja the second time, but you get what I mean. Like, the advice from the flashback
he remembers the
is
advice.
the thing that
right.
Well, he doesn't even remember it. I mean, it's not like we've got the sensei's voice like coming over him.
No, but we're seeing the flashbacks, which in my mind implies that he's remembering these things.
Yes. Yeah, as far as if he's our narrator, right? Like those memories.
Well, yeah, and like the way they use the candles and stuff like that. There's a very
and it's sepia tone and all that stuff.
Yeah. There's that. I'm glad you pointed that out because that is a cool thing to flashback. And I think the show generally does well with flashbacks. We talked about in the Mask of the Phantasm, the Citizen Kane type flashback styles, and I think it works well here. Like he's driving, he's thinking about he sees a light and he thinks candles, and you see the candle reflects his eye, and then transition to flashback. Again, a great way to articulate that this is not like a totally disconnected thing. No. He is thinking about this and he's feeling this out. I think that's the transitions are very well executed.
This is the thing that makes me say they're sharp enough. I will not disagree that they're just the fight between him and Dick, the practice fight, is fine,
right?
But it doesn't really add other than it's like an interesting allusion to that relationship, but they don't do anything with that.
Right.
There's a chunk of time that we could have done something different with.
It just didn't feel focused. Like, are we supposed to be focusing on Batman and Robin? Because clearly there are parts of the episode where the Robin stuff is done very well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, cool, I like this. But then I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be investing my energy and focus on Batman and Robin or Batman and Kyodai Ken. Because the flashbacks would imply Kyodai Ken, but then present day implies Robin.
Just enough Robin. Yeah. Over and above where he's like integral to the plot.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. Again, they could be sharper. I think they are more than sharp enough.
And listen, I'm splitting here. This is a solid episode. I think on paper it works great. I just think the execution was not as exceptional as a lot of episodes of Batman the Animated Series.
And although the fight choreography is not necessarily mind-blowing, I will say that if you are a fan of the genre of martial arts film,
that was fun.
You are here for this episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
Because it does hit all of these beats that you want it to hit. And we'll talk more about it in Day of the Samurai, but it really also brings it all back home when, spoiler warning, Kyodai Ken shows back up. I mean,
what?
listen.
You mean he didn't die when he fell out the window?
We didn't see a body, and ninjas are very resourceful. I mean, he was coming back, or at least they were leaving it open for it. But they really do tie a sweet bow on that when he comes back, and we'll talk more about that then. But I just really as we said, all those genre beats.
Do you think...
Awesome.
Question. And I have not watched Day of the Samurai yet. So I'm going to hold off final judgment because I'm hoping that it'll actually make me feel stronger about this episode after watching that one, which leads me to my question. Would it have been better to have them paired together as a two-parter instead of having them as separate episodes at different points in the season?
No, the plots are unconnected except for the personalities involved.
Okay.
And in fact, Day of the Samurai would probably have had to have been a two-parter with more flashbacks if we hadn't had this one to set up who everybody is.
Okay.
Now, this is not me saying that this episode was a waste. It's that building on continuity. You could go to Day of the Samurai and they tell you enough to watch it and be fine because that's BTAS.
Well, my thing is, I'm sure in the production side, these came out close enough together that they probably were on a schedule where they knew that they were going to do a follow-up episode 4 or 5 episodes later.
It'll be a few weeks, or it'll be next week if we're doing every day after school. Right? Yeah,
right.
Totally. That was definitely the plan.
We've hit on most of the high points for me. There's a lot of fun nods. Little fun thing. Robin did a very Robin thing earlier. When Robin shows up to help Batman on the roof the first time, he says, "Listen up, dipstick." Oh man, yeah. Little things like that were just those were charming in a very 90s-tastic children's television sort of way.
Clearly, they decided they were writing a 18, 19, 20-year-old Dick Grayson until he starts talking.
Yeah.
I just don't understand. Listen up, dipstick. He can be a real jerk, but you gotta love him. Who are you? This show nails dialogue on people. In the same episode, you have this fantastic interaction between Dick and Alfred that we talked about. But earlier on, Bruce Wayne shows up. "Good morning, Commissioner." I wish. It's fantastic.
Right.
But as soon as Robin shows up, it's like they bring in the C Squad. I don't get it.
They maybe just don't know how to write Robin.
I guess.
Maybe they don't know how old he is.
Yeah, right. Well, they send him to college. They've got to, yeah. And especially looking forward, we're going to see an expertly written Barbara Gordon very shortly. I just don't understand why Dick keeps getting the short end of the stick on the dialogue side.
I think they're still figuring it out. They're figuring the companion out because I feel like eventually we'll get to Tim Drake also, and I feel like Tim Drake is a lot more consistent, as I recall.
That's fair. I mean, this was not a Batman and Robin show. The only reason I have a problem with it is because we see all these other secondary characters really have opportunities to shine.
Right.
Especially in dialogue.
Right.
And Dick Grayson just gets dipstick.
Dipstick.
Caleb. Dipstick.
That is literally, I recall saying those exact words when I was in the 3rd grade. Not an exaggeration.
Yeah, right.
Which, hey, that's the target demo. So maybe they're trying to make Robin more relatable?
Sure.
Going to our cracked mirror segment that we do sometimes, especially when we have new villains. I did find some here.
Okay.
Even though I don't think they were home runs in the execution, ideally. They are both driven to be the very best.
It's true, yes.
That no one ever was. They want to be the best at what they are.
You're right. Because even Kyodai Ken now, you're right. I mean, obviously, in the dojo competition is obvious. But even at the end, when Summer's like, you're just a common thief. And he's like, I'm a very uncommon thief.
I'm the best thief.
I'm the best thief that's ever been. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
In Batman, young Bruce Wayne is very like, I've got to be the best
Yeah.
there is. You know what I mean? Like, so they're driven by that to be number one. But the difference, of course, is that Kyodai Ken betrays his master, tries to steal, and Bruce Wayne listens and heeds his master's advice.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be kind of the divergent path. And then one of them, Yakuza. So anyway.
You're making a fine point. Kyodai Ken is different than a lot of the other opposite numbers we've talked about because they tend to be more psychological.
Right.
This is much more opposite number in action.
Yes.
Kyodai Ken is sneaking around under cover of darkness to steal the sword, and Bruce Wayne catches him because he is training. He's only there to catch him stealing the sword because he's so driven. And Kyodai Ken is stealing a 500-year-old sword from his sensei because he is driven. This is very interesting. I like that.
It makes him a little different. And I appreciate it's a different way to show how these guys are similar but different.
Yeah, yeah. And different, we don't get different in action in that way nearly as often as we get different in mind or different in
philosophy. Outlook. Yeah. We're about the end of the conversation, but of course, before we wrap up, I want to give us the opportunity to make alternate media recommendations based on this episode. And I mean, the references were themselves, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw out Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2, of course, another beautiful, awesome homage to the Kung Fu films that this film is also homaging and kind of lifting from. Ninja Assassin, which is another movie that came out a few years ago, that it plays into the same trope. Oh, hey, my master got killed by this dark other apprentice, and now I must stop him, sort of thing.
Absolutely. Because I have mixed feelings about the 2 volumes of Kill Bill, I'm going to say go to the source. Several of these are on Netflix. Go watch Shaolin versus Ninja. Go watch the 36 Chambers. Go watch the 5 Deadly Venoms. It's so good.
Watch it all. Have a marathon.
And my rec, outside of the things they're obviously drawing from, is actually an incredibly goofy, but nevertheless fun homage to all of that stuff. DOA. One of the few video game movies that I think is any good at all.
Dead or Alive. You know what? I'll take it.
It's not a great movie. People do not listen to me saying
it's
this
terrible.
is a great film.
It's terrible, but it's great.
But it's great. And the escape of the ninja princess from her mountaintop monastery of ninjas, like if you only watched that, it would be worth it.
Yes. Oh my God, watch it. It's fun. Fantastic.
About wraps up this animated discussion. Caleb, where can people go to continue the conversation with you?
Well, Joshua, you can always find me on Twitter talking about film, television, video games, and all sorts of other pop culture goodness at C Masters Talk. That's letter C Masters Talk. I'm also the editor-in-chief and film critic at the Cinematropolis, and we publish these in-depth essays on all types of different films, oftentimes including science fiction and superhero films, all the stuff you'd want to read about. And you can find all these articles at thecinematropolis.com. Joshua, what about you?
I'm also most active on Twitter, where you can find me easily enough at Joshua Unruh. And remember that an animated discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions.
Join us next time when we take a much-deserved vacation where we discover the strange secret of Bruce Wayne in Season 2, Episode 9 of Batman the Animated Series.
Until next time, we'll see you back here. Same bat time, same bat channel.